So, hi everyone. It's a real pleasure to have been invited to speak here. It's wonderful to actually hear other practitioners, to hear the case studies of people who are applying this in the office. And it's particularly good to see so many people here, because I think, as Martin said, he used the word movement, and this needs to be a movement. So, Monica asked me to do a talk on the pitfalls of happiness training, since I'm a psychologist and a trainer. So prepare yourselves, this talk will be dark and depressing. I'm here today representing several brands, but I'm a happiness ambassador for Bloom Company in Korea, and this is a 7-year-old company that has been doing happiness at work in probably one of the trickiest happiness markets in the world after Japan. We have, I'm very happy to say, within the room, 3 of our happiness facilitators and Bloom Company education partners. We have Roya, wave, and Elif and Ebru over there. And then also from Prague Training Academy. And also I'm the founder of Positive Leadership Development, where I look at uniting positive psychology and embodiment traditions such as Aikido, mindfulness in development and happiness. So I started off my academic career as a psychologist, but 20 years ago there was no positive psychology, there was no happiness, there was no how do you make a complete person. It was let's make a small computer model of perception because that's safe. So actually 3 years ago I did an executive master's at IE Business School on the application of positive psychology to business. And it was an academic, but it was also experiential. And they thought that Juan, I think, is he? Yeah, this guy, the guy who organized it, the Professor Juan Alberto Young, they thought the business school thought he was crazy doing this. It was one of the first MAs on positive psychology in business in Europe. We had to do mindfulness and yoga and all sorts of weird stuff like that. Also, Spot, the Korean guy, up here, because I'll talk about him later. Now, as well as a psychologist, I'm an Aikido teacher. And Aikido, well, like science is empirical. Aikido is also empirical, because if you make a mistake, you might end up wearing a sharp, pointy thing in your body. So as you practice, you learn what you're... and you know, here it might look like I'm simply learning to take a knife off someone. But what I'm actually learning to do here is how to be happy, joyful, connective, loving, and creative while being attacked with a knife, which is slightly different. There's a little frustration in you know, the comparison between working as an Aikido teacher and working in business, because as an Aikido teacher, I might look after someone's development on a weekly basis for 10 years. And quite often in business, you get a couple of days, unless you're coaching or a consultant. So there's a different depth that you can reach. And this is kind of a TED talk, so here's a picture of Gandhi for no reason. Spiritual. It sucks being a scientist. I mean, the world is nuts. I completely agree with Yuri on that. This shower of cretins during Brexit actually said the nation is tired of experts. And as either trainers in this work or people in this movement, we are up against a lot of political and business ideology for the way that things were happening, you know, have been happening so far, are still happening for the vast majority of workers in the world. Although, you know, I kind of agree with Alex. I think that the assholes are in another conference on fear-based management and how to bully your people into performance till they die. And you need new ones. But, you know, as a scientist, I believe that there's very much that we can do and that we can apply, but we're going against the grain. Then again, I think it could be worse. I could be a climate change scientist, or Donald Trump could be president. Oh, fuck. This is the Chapek brothers. They invented robots, and pretty much in 10 years we'll be having a conference probably on there is no work. They're all doing it. What do we do now? Hopefully, anyway. But it comes from a Czech word, doesn't it? Which means a certain kind of slave. And work for many people in history until now is a form, to an extent, of slavery, when it should be art and expression. So, how do we create team? This is the positive psychology at the moment. There are two dimensions. We've been focused on performance for a very long time. And quite often the well-being dimension is ignored. What is flourishing? Flourishing, whether it's a person, a company, or a team, is optimal being at our best. Yeah. Now, obviously, we all want to be up there, really. And listening to startups and NGOs, you get the feeling that they're around here somewhere. Either they're going well and their people are passionate and there's a lot of enthusiasm, or they're very happy, but they've got some work to do in the doing. They're still wanting to grow and do better. But they be pretty happy from listening to Pavlina and some of the other people. In large corporations, well, we're big, so maybe we're doing this very well, but we're not particularly happy. Or we're going down here because we forgot to think about this. And large corporates tend to be relatively rubbish at implementing well-being. Oh, so pitfalls specifically of happiness training. Your intention. Why are you wanting your people to be happy? In Aikido, there are some people who train because they want to prove to everyone that they're stronger. And they can do that. They get quite successful at it. But by the time they become teachers, their club is a horrible Nazi boot camp. Yeah, because their intention has determined what they're going to do. So, I feel doing this work, it's very glad that people are paying attention to it now, but I feel that there's a danger that there's a little bit of this. Yeah, so, happiness will make us more money, so you must all be happy now. Happiness is mandatory, okay? Actually, my sort of training colleagues, when I first started presenting the positive psychology work, they said, this stuff sounds awful in Czech and Slovak. And I was like, why? Well, they were this really Stalinist. You will be happy. Obviously, you're in paradise. So we have to be careful about this. And I think a little bit as well, like Alex was saying, if we're doing this because we're aiming for money, we can get to money, but through happiness. And same, actually, we can get to happiness, but not necessarily aiming directly at it. This is Monica. I like Monica. She invited me to be here. When I met her, she said three things. She said, when she started her work, she told her people to call her Monica, not Pani tell the God thing. She also changed the contracts so that people didn't have a shitty one-year contract and couldn't buy a house, but had actual some stability in their contracts and could get loans and things like that. Real stuff. Yeah, and then also she said as she moves now to being a consultant and working on happiness in companies, she wants to build long-term relationships with her clients. And I respect that a lot because actually nothing else works. So the non-bullshit, maximum respect on that. Oh, Simon Sinek. Simon Sinek, and again I thought of Monica when she was doing her talk. Simon Sinek, there's a great summary of his book, Why Leaders Eat Last. It was based on the Marines. In the Marines, the general doesn't eat till everybody's eaten. And he looked at the anthropology and biology of leadership. What is a leader for? And, why in early human cultures do we give all the good food and the pretty members of the opposite sex to the alphas? Yeah? Why do they get all that? Well, it's basically because when the tiger with the really big teeth turns up, guess who deals with it? It's the alphas. So you want them well fed and preferably to breed quickly because the attrition rate is quite high. But he says the role of a leader is to create a circle of safety around the team so that the danger is outside the circle, not in politics and backstabbing with your colleagues or being shouted to death by your manager. The danger must be outside. And Google has found a similar thing doing research on why they're high-performing teams. The one factor, because every team was different, they couldn't find, but the one factor was actually psychological safety. Within the team, the people felt protected, they felt they could be themselves, they felt they could express themselves. And the example, the LinkedIn example of Monica, is a fantastic example of this kind of leadership. When I was a psychology student, half the essays were about this debate. Yeah? Is it genetics or is it the environment? It's one or the other. And you always wrote an essay where you kind of go, it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, because basically it's about 50-50. And of course it's a psychology essay, so you have to finish with more research is needed, which is scientist code for give me more money. But when we're looking at performance and well-being, there's actually, very strong in positive psychology, and a lot of this happiness work is it's your job to be happy. No, you must be happy. If you're not making yourself happy when you're going to work, it's bad. Yeah? And actually, a lot of positive psychology, like Martin Seligman, is a very right-wing Republican person. And, quite often, again, there's two sides to everything. You have personal responsibility and individual intentional activity, and then you have systemic injustice and environment and culture design. But quite often, if you say systemic injustice, everyone right-wing flees the room. And then you say personal responsibility and everyone left-wing flees the room. It's both. And we have to model what we're doing on that. So he said happiness is not the goal. Happiness is a result. Yeah? It's like a butterfly. If you try and catch it, it flies away. If you've got to focus on other things, it comes to get you. Viktor Frankl and my book recommendation. Here are two scientists, Martin Seligman and Carol Riff, different models of what actually composes happiness and well-being. We have positive emotion, engagement, positive relationships, meaning and accomplishment. We can hear the results and the relationship that Alex was talking about earlier. I'd like to give this a little bit of depth. This is there's a lady called Bronnie Ware who looked at the 5 regrets of the dying. I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. I wish I had let myself be happier. And you can recognize these 5 elements of PERMA, these components of well-being in there. And this is, this is reality, this power. And, for me, it's particularly poignant. My father died a couple of months ago. And the last one, I wish I'd let myself be happier, was something he never really got. It was if then that someone called Sanjeev was talking about, or all the things must be in the row, and then I'm allowed to be happy. And, this is what we have to consider for our good life. The other lady, Carol Riff, she adds things like autonomy. In school and in business, we often push compliance rather than autonomy. Self-acceptance, things like that. If we go towards these things, we get happiness as a result. So design and delivery as well. How do we create the programs? How do we deliver them? Now, it's not training. You can't train a person to be happy like you train it is a skill, but you can't train them like a dog. Or there's not one size fits all, as I think Sanjeev said earlier. You have to facilitate the person to design their own happiness and their happiness practices that take them there. So it's facilitation. Every person is different. I like this quote from Yogi Berra. In theory, there's no difference between theory and practice. In practice, there is. I might be a scientist, but I'm a practitioner. I like to apply. I'm not very big on theory. And if we want to make any growth, change, development, it's daily practices over time that make the impact. And so it takes time. I'm running out of time. Information is useless. If information was useful, Wikipedia would have saved the world. We forget information as soon as we're under pressure. So we need to practice positive rituals under ever greater degrees of stress till they become positive habits, till they become part of our being. And very often with companies, we focus on, this is how our company works, this is our hardware, this is our hardware, this is our structure, this is how we function, this is how we do meetings, and now please squeeze yourself in this box. What we work on is to optimize the mindware of people, and then with management, with the whole company, designing the software, how do we do our meetings, and designing the environment, whether it's let's have a fantastic office or let's have internal coaches and so on. So these are JP, Jung-Hyul Park. He's been doing happiness, actually when he started the company it was because a friend of his had committed suicide in company. So he created all these tools to open the doorway, to make happiness easy and gamified, and then to enter into dialogue, and to then create long-term change. Please buy our stuff. So what do? We need to design practices and then clone them throughout the business, the best practices. Learning is a process, it's not an event. So, 2 days, 1 day you can get insight, but if there's no follow-up, it doesn't go very far. Viktor Frankl, there's not much, do you know Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor? He was a psychoanalyst who was in Auschwitz. Very surprised that some people managed to be happy and loving and sharing in Auschwitz. There's a show on YouTube where he's using an airplane metaphor, but basically what he's saying is if you treat people as they are, you get less than that. I've actually worked in companies where people treat you like you're lazy thieves, and you definitely get worse than that. But if you treat people as they could be, then you don't actually necessarily get it, but you'll be surprised at how much they rise towards it. Stop following me, Gandhi. So we all know the quote, be the change that you want to see in the world. There's a lovely story where a father comes with his son and says, Gandhi, tell my son is fat. Tell my son to stop eating sugar. Gandhi goes, come back in 2 weeks. So he comes back, he goes, please tell my son to stop eating sugar, young man. And the father goes, why couldn't you tell him that 2 weeks ago? It's like, well, 2 weeks ago, I was eating sugar. So, the real question is, who are you? And what change would you like to embody in the world? Thank you very much.